a seat when you can. Thanks very much for coming, and it's my pleasure to introduce Zhihao Jiang. Most likely I did not pronounce this right. He comes from UPenn, where he is a postdoctoral researcher with the Department of Electrical Systems and Systems Engineering at the University at UPenn, and he received his PhD in computer science and material science, MS in robotics from the University of Pennsylvania in 2016 and 2010. His research interest is to apply formal methods and model-based design to improve the safety and efficacy of life-critical systems. So he brought with him pacemakers and all other very cool gadgets that we don't see every day and hopefully never, actually. So thank you very much for coming here, and I look forward to your talk.
Okay, thank you for the introduction. So today I will talk about my research on how to ensure the safety of medical cyber-physical systems. So this is a pacemaker. It is a device that is implanted underneath the shoulder area, and there are two leads inserted into the heart so that you can monitor the electrical activity of the heart. And based on the diagnosis, if the pacemaker decides the heart is beating too slow, it will deliver electrical pacing to increase the heart rate. So I'll pass this device around and you can kind of look at it.
Was this used?
No, it's a new one. It's a sample device. It's definitely clean. So a device like an implantable pacemaker has 80,000 lines of code, and complex software is responsible for making the correct diagnosis and make the appropriate therapy. And between 1990 to 2000, there are 600,000 pacemaker recalls, and among them, 200,000, which is 40% of them, are due to software issues. So between 2008 and 2012, 15% of all medical device recalls were due to software issues. How do we ensure the safety of the software in medical cyber-physical system? And unlike a car recall, where you can just drive the car back to the dealership, a recall on a medical device like a pacemaker requires a surgical procedure where you have to cut the patient open and physically remove the device. And you can see the blood over there. So what are the challenges for design safe? Sure.
How often does the battery need to be changed anyways?
I think normally it lasts like 7 years. But hopefully the patient can last that long. So what are the core challenges for design safe medical CPIs? The first challenge is that the device is controlling a very messy plan. What do I mean by that is human physiology is very partially understood. And also human physiology tends to have very large variability. And every patient is different. And for each of the patient, when you drink a coffee, after you drink a coffee, it will be very different from the pacemaker point of view. And to make the problem worse, this device has very limited observability of the physical plan. So basically that means that it is difficult for a pacemaker to make the correct diagnosis because there can be multiple heart conditions that map to the same input to the device. And this also make it hard for us to determine whether the pacemaker has delivered appropriate therapy, because just by looking at the recording of the pacemaker, it's hard to determine whether you increase the heart rate appropriately, whether the patient actually needs it. So how do we solve these challenges? So my research aims to use physiological models to capture the domain knowledge in the medical domain and capture all the physiological context. And we use formal method to capture the variability of the patient conditions. And all of these enabled us to use model-based design of the medical cyber-physical system. And my goal is to design high-confidence software for life-critical cyber-physical system and try to let our heart catch the bug before your heart does. So first, I'll talk about how do I model the heart. I'll first take us through a journey like how I understand why do we need a pacemaker and how the heart works. So the heart is actually the heart contraction is actually caused by electrical signals. So you have specialized tissue like the SA node over here, periodically generate the electrical signals. And those signals will spread around the heart. So first, it will activate both atria and causing the atria to push the blood into the ventricle. So then the signal arrive at this AV node where it will have some delay for the ventricle to fully fill. And afterwards, the electrical get to the ventricle and the ventricle push the blood into our body. So when the electrical signal, the generation and the conduction of the electrical signal became delayed, you will have a slow heart rate. You may not have enough blood for your system. So this behavior is called bradycardia, meaning slow heart rate. And pacemaker is designed to treat bradycardia. So a pacemaker has two leads inserted into the atria and the ventricle, respectively. And both of these leads are capable of monitoring the local electrical activities. And what the pacemaker does is that when the activity exceeds certain threshold, it will register that as an event. And same for the ventricle. So after this event, with some delay, if there is no another signal coming in, the pacemaker will think the heart rate is too low, and it will deliver pacing to increase the heart rate. And it can maintain the minimum ventricular rate, which is essential for us. So we can see now that the pacemaker only look at two locations of the heart, and it only look at the timing of these electrical signals. So now we want to look at what are the heart models that are available that can capture these behaviors.
Sorry. So what happens if it measures that the atria needs a pulse, but as it's delivering it, it starts to happen anyways?
So that actually happens, and it's called the fusion beat. But I don't think that's a big issue because after each contraction, there is a period of time in which the tissue cannot be activated. So your pacing right after that won't cause any harm to the patient. Cannot cause much harm to the patient. So there are existing models of the heart that models the different level of electrical activity. So here is a model that models the cellular electrical activity of the heart. It models the ion channels on the cell and how that affect the electrical behavior of the tissue. And these kind of models has been used on very large scale or high fidelity spatial models to monitor the whole heart electrical behavior. But these kind of models have unnecessary details in terms of pacemaker testing because pacemaker only look at 2 points in the heart and it only look at the timing of the events. And these large number of parameters in this model make it impossible to do model identification. And also this complex model cannot be used for formal verification, for example. So I have developed a heart model that we focused on the electrical conduction system of the heart, which is the system that affects the heart behavior, the observable behavior of the heart. So we only model tissue that generates the electrical signals and the tissue that can affect the output of the heart, so that we can model these electrical conduction systems with node and path automata. So each of the node automata models the electrical generation and blocking of key heart tissues within the heart. And path automata models the connectivity between those nodes and the conduction delay between them. So we can use this node and path models to capture different conditions of the heart, so that we can provide a physiological context. So here is an example of the simulation of the heart, and we are able to generate this realistic synthetic signal into the pacemaker. And this is how we validate our heart model. Our model are conditional specific. And so we can give the model to the physicians, and we claim that this model, for example, is for atrial flutter. And in the simulator, the physicians can deliver different stimuli into the model and see how the model responds. The physician have certain expected response from the model, and when they actually match, we can claim that it's a valid model. So here is an example of us doing this kind of validation. So here, the patient has two conduction pathways. And in a normal heartbeat, we can see the signal is going through this fast conduction pathway on the right and go to the ventricle. But when a physician will deliver a very fast speed over here, the interval here is much shorter than this, the signal is blocked in the fast pathway because the fast pathway is still recovering from the last activation. So the signal now goes through the slow pathway. And when it goes back, the fast pathway has finished its recovery, so the signal goes back. And the signal then will go in the loop within the circuit, causing the heart rate to increase and inappropriately. This is one particular example for us to capture the closed loop behavior of the heart.
So,
Sure.
sorry, so basically your simulation is producing some function under some context. This is what the heart does.
Yes.
And you're asking a person to verify that they have the same mental function you do by testing it on certain inputs. And for like any set of inputs I test, there are going to be an exponentially large number of functions that match the input-output behavior on those, right? Like
Yeah, but it doesn't matter how it matched to there. It only matters it matches, right?
No, but what I'm saying is that they have some mental model in their head, and you're asking, is your model equal to their mental model by probing in some locations?
Yeah, but that's exactly what we want to do, right? We want to capture their mental model.
Right, but you're capturing an approximation of it at for some context. You're not capturing their mental model.
And what matters for their mental model is the behavior of that model, right? The behavior of our model matches the behavior of their model. So it is a good...
In some situations.
Yeah, in this context. The model is only valid in this context. I'm not claiming that the model is our model is capturing the actual physiological phenomena. It only captures the behavior of that model. Does that answer your question? Yeah. Thanks. So here is an example of our heart model interacting with a pacemaker model. And we also have implemented our heart model on a hardware platform. So we have this heart-on-the-chip platform. So the heart model is interacting with a commercial pacemaker through an analog interface. And you guys can look at this if you want.
So can you load up different heart conditions into this?
Yeah, we load the heart condition into the FPGA platform, and then the pacemaker is interacting with the heart. You can see the light blinking. That's how the signal is traveling throughout the heart, and pacemaker is interacting with it.
Sorry, so
Sure.
the heart in the chip
because there's no
basically
batteries.
simulate your model, right? Because it simulates the heart.
Yeah. Yeah. So now we have the heart model that captures the physiological context. How do we capture the variability of the physiological behaviors? So we can use, in this research, I want to use closed loop model checking for that. So model checking is a technique that can explore the whole reachable space of a model for property evaluations. So for example, intuitively, if this is the state space of a model, and the M represents the reachable state of the model, if there is a requirement phi, and there is a portion of M that is not within phi, the model checker will return a counterexample. So it has been widely used in semiconductor industry to model to verify chip design. So the most naive solution to the problem is, can we generate a large number of heart models and pair them with a pacemaker model and then verify the safety property on that? The answer is actually no. What do we mean by that? What we really want to capture is the whole observable behavior space of the pacemaker. So pacemaker has two inputs, and we add time to it, so it should be a three-dimensional space. So here I represent it as a two-dimensional space. And if we look at these heart models, each of them only represent a very small portion in this observable behavior space. So even if a property is satisfied by within all of these models, it doesn't mean that the device is safe. There may exist behaviors that are not captured in here that is still a safety violation. So how do we increase the coverage on the observable behavior space? So we want to use a very powerful technique called the over-approximation. So intuitively, what does that mean is that if we have two models, if the D is the observable space of the pacemaker, and P1, P2 represent the coverage for two models, you can create a larger model M that captures the behavior of P1 and P2. And then if there is a property that is satisfied by M, P1, P2 also satisfy this property. So this is the over-approximation. But so we want to use so this M captures more behavior than P1 and P2. And we want to use that as advantage. So it can implicitly cover things like P3. So there are behavior that are in this model which are physiological possible, but it's not explicitly captured by like single heart models. So now when we have another property, phi prime, and a counterexample return which is not in P1 or P2, is this counterexample a valid counterexample? So I remember that the first time when we use over-approximation to capture the behavior, and we show the physician a very abstract heart model, the counterexample, and ask them whether it's a safety violation. The physicians were like, it depends. We were asking, what does that mean? Actually, because in order for M to capture the behavior of P1, P2, M became very simple, and then it loses the physiological context, so the physician don't know whether it's valid or not. So we really need a framework to capture the physiological context and provide interpretable counterexample to the physicians. So it can be in order to achieve over-approximation, we can actually increase the non-determinism in the model. So for example, in the model, we can enable multiple transitions, or we can relax the guard conditions. So these kind of non-determinism is something you don't want when you design a system, but we can use them here to capture more behaviors. So we have developed the physiological abstraction rules to simplify the heart model and increase the coverage on the observable behavior of the heart. So for example, here is a heart model with two nodes and a path. And in the new model, we removed one of the states in the node automata, and we added a non-deterministic transition in the path automata. So as a result, so here is the original state space, reachable state space. And all the state in the middle has been abstracted. So the new model actually captures all the observable behavior of the old model and increase something, and also capturing some behavior that wasn't captured in here. So for example, so the transition from this state to this wasn't there in the original model, but in the more abstract model, we actually enabled that state. We can also combine different heart models together to achieve more behavior coverage. So for example, in each of these three models, there is a guard condition called T-rest. So each of them covers a small portion of this guard condition, and we can capture all of them with a new model. So now we can apply abstraction rules on our initial set of heart models to capture more behaviors. So we can see that the behavior coverage for these models has been increased, and we should note that the more abstract model covers all the behavior of the more refined model. And we can keep applying abstraction rules so that we'll arrive at a model that captures all possible behavior of the pacemaker. So basically, this model is able to send an event to the pacemaker at any time. So now we have this abstraction tree structure. How do we do model checking? So we start with this model that captures all possible behavior. And if there is a counterexample returned here, we check, we refine the heart model so that we can provide more physiological context. So for example, we can trace all the way back to a particular heart model and provide a physiological context there. We can even find multiple mechanisms that can violate the same property using this approach. So now people may ask, why do we need this intermediate step? Can we just verify the model on this the heart model that captures everything, and then check the physiological context on the model, on the initial set of heart models? Well, the reason is because the initial set of model is not complete. So more than likely, you will have a counterexample that is not captured by them. So for example, we trace back through this route, and we arrive at the model here. So these three models, all of its children doesn't have a counterexample. But does that mean that it's not a valid counterexample? Maybe not. But the reason why we have this intermediate step is because we have provided partial physiological context so that the physician can look at the counterexample at this level and determine whether it's valid or not.
So,
sure.
So there seems to be two situations you could be living in. One is that you just don't have the set of possible models, like the full set.
Yeah.
And the other is that the pacemaker just is not able to distinguish which model you are actually in.
Yeah.
And which of those do you actually think you're living in?
The second one. Like there may be multiple conditions that map to the same input. Remember, one of the challenges I was talking about is the pacemaker only has 2 beats. There can be multiple conditions that map to the same input to the device.
So what is the argument against just saying we are not observing enough information to act safely? We need to add more sensors.
That's never the right answer.
No, but
Yeah.
but why?
You mean why don't add more sensors?
Yes.
That I don't have an answer to that. That's for the device company to consider. But this framework is trying to identify these things. Afterwards, if the argument is strong enough, they may say, okay, we really need to distinguish these two scenarios. So because having existing scenario like this is not the problem. How often does it happen, or how big of a problem it is, matters. So maybe these two conditions, even if you cannot distinguish that, the result is not catastrophic.
So let me ask the question a different way. What would you need as an output from this process to say, I cannot verify safety? Given the range of models that we have and the observables, there is no way for me to provide a safe control.
You mean absolutely safe control?
Sure.
So the point of having a structure like this is that we can verify properties more generally, like design intentions that may never be satisfied, right? So for example, if we go to another domain, like autonomous vehicle, you want to develop autonomous vehicle that never crash, which never happens, right? So with a structure like this, you may find scenario that it crash, but it's not your fault. So those are the violations that you don't need to address. So you want to identify all possible scenarios that your design intention will violate it, and then for the device, for the domain expert to decide whether you need to address it or not. So even in these scenarios, when you find multiple counterexamples, the physician may decide, okay, this is fine, but the other one you need to really address it. So that's the goal of this. So yeah.
Sorry, can you say a little bit what are those R2, R3s? What do they represent?
Oh, so those are the abstraction rules. We developed a set of different abstraction rules, not only limited to the one I just showed. So by applying these rules, we can get to the, yeah. So yeah, we've verified the basic safety properties, like the heart rate never go too low intuitively, pacemaker never increase the heart rate too high. And also we look at a scenario called pacemaker mediated tachycardia. So those are the scenarios that the pacemaker increase the heart rate inappropriately. So we verified, can it increase it inappropriately? The answer is yes. And we can use the abstraction tree structure to capture multiple cases of them. And for some of the cases, device companies has developed the algorithm to terminate those behavior, and we also verified whether the termination has been successful.
So that's for the specific pacemaker that you're testing, right? So basically for one particular device, you attach to the model, right, which is in the heart.
Yes.
And they use to verify, right?
Yes. And after the device model is verified, we want to translate the verified model to actual verified implementation. So we have this UPA model of a pacemaker that is verified with the non-deterministic heart models that we just showed. And afterwards, we developed a model translation tool to translate UPA model to state flow chart. And from state flow chart, you can use similar encoder to generate the C-code implementation of the device. And so this is the from verified model to verified code structure. So we have heart model at the different design stage of the pacemaker, so that we can do model-based closed loop validation of the device. So this research has been published in different research areas: model-based design, formal method, cerebral physical system, and biomedical engineering. So here's a summary of my research during my dissertation. So the device has to go through development and the clinical evaluation before it goes to market. So in my dissertation research, I have developed heart model that enabled model-based closed loop validation. And I use closed loop model checking to capture the physiological variabilities and verify the safety properties of the device. And I also developed the model translation tool that enabled verified model to verified code. So the research plan for me is to keep developing models, tools, and frameworks so that we can incorporate these research into the actual certification or clinical evaluation of the device. So for example, using closed loop model checking, we can get existence of safety violations. But the more important question is how often do they happen and how severe the problem is. So we need to develop ways to do quantitative verification of the device to provide us that answer. And the clinical evaluation of the device in clinical trial is very expensive. And the biggest challenge for that is they have to decide how many patients should be enrolled in the trial. So what we are proposing to do is to use in silico preclinical trial so that we can use model to generate a larger population of patients and simulate the device and evaluate the performance before the clinical trial start, so that we can have a better estimation of how many patients should be enrolled. And the ideal goal is to use existing patient data to develop patient-specific heart models, so that we can use virtual patient to not only help planning the trial, but substitute real patient in real trials. And I'm also looking forward to look at the security aspect of the device, especially how security issue can actually affect the safety of the device. So I'll talk about, and the overall goal is to provide regulatory evidence, safety evidence with computer models. And currently, this is how safety evidence are provided. So mostly through bench testing, animal testing, and human, which is clinical trials. And my goal is to significantly increase the computer simulation so that it can mostly replace bench testing and animal testing. And ideally, it can substitute real patient to reduce the human testing. And I'll give a short introduction of some of the preliminary results that we get for these in silico preclinical trials. So after the device has finished the development process, it will go through animal testing and eventually test on real patient, which is the ultimate closed-loop validation. So let's go through one of the clinical trials. So this is a defibrillator. It's, you can see that it's considerably larger than a pacemaker. So what it can do is that when the heart rate is too fast, it can deliver the electrical shock to the patient to restore the heart rhythm. It's just like the defibrillator you see from outside, but it's just an implantable version. The challenge for this implantable defibrillator is that there are a lot of inappropriate shocks. Basically, it means that the patient doesn't need that, but it decides to shock it anyway. So a really bad joke is that like 50% of those inappropriate, you get one shock and the other one is for free. So, and getting shocked by a defibrillator is not comfortable. A patient described it as a horse kicked in the chest. It's like 800 volts and 35 joules of signals coming in. So device companies has tried to develop algorithm to reduce the number of inappropriate therapies. And they want to evaluate the performance of their algorithm by comparing it with some competitors. So Boston Scientific started a clinical trial called Rhythm ID Going Head-to-Head trial. So they compared their new Vitality 2 device to existing Medtronic devices, and they try to evaluate the occurrence of the inappropriate therapies. So their initial assumption is that their algorithm is 25% better than the other algorithm. And based on this 25% mark, they recruited 2,000 patients, and the trial lasted for 5 years. So this was back in 2006. And after the result comes out, both of the devices are exhibiting a significant amount of inappropriate therapy, and the Vitality 2 device is actually performing worse than the Medtronic algorithm. So this trial actually essentially failed because the result cannot be cannot support your initial assumption. So what can we?
So were they only measuring false positives here? Because I think I could beat that.
Yeah, both. They are evaluating.
It does nothing.
Yeah, they are evaluating both of them. Both false positive and false negatives. So like a sensitivity and specificity for the device.
Wait, were they? Are those numbers up here, or was it just much better for getting it right, or
getting it right is almost 100%.
I see. So
at least 99. Both of them get it right most of the time.
I assume you can probably kill the patient if you don't want it, if you have a false negative.
So assume back in 2006, before the trial start, can we use in silico preclinical trial to get a better estimate of how much better these devices are? So we first collected the patient data from existing database and also the clinical literatures so that we can learn the parameter distribution for the heart models. And by sampling from those distribution, we generated 10,000 of condition-specific heart models. And we use these heart models to evaluate the device algorithm of both of device companies and look at the result. So here is one of the results. On the left, we have the distribution for 8 different heart conditions. And in this particular case, it's a uniform distribution. And on the right, we have the rate of inappropriate therapy for the Boston Scientific device and the Medtronic device. So we can see that we vary different populations, and across the board, the Boston Scientific is performing worse than the Medtronic device. So if the investigators of the right trial has performed this in silico trial before the trial start, they'll at least think twice about that 25% mark. Another result that we can have is the patient conditional level analysis. So especially for heart conditions that are very rare, we can still generate a large number so that we can have a very high confidence of the results. This will help us estimate a better number for the patients. So we have developed a tool chain for the in silico preclinical trial so that other parties like physicians, like regulators or device companies can perform these trials on themselves. So we can collect the patient data and extract the parameter distribution. We can generate the virtual cohort, and we can both simulate the trial or actually have device in the loop, and we can view the result. So here is the example of the device in the loop testing. We have the testing platform that can send signal to a real SED, and we can monitor that with the device programmer. So that the testing platform can also acquire the shock sent from the device. We have to build the isolation circuit so that it won't actually break the circuit, because it's like 800 volts. So my take on the cyber physical system is that we really need to understand the application domain, and we need to have the confidence to step out of our comfort zone and really go into to understand the actual domain. So what I did is I actually suit up and I watched the physicians doing their procedure and understand how the heart works. And we have collaborators from the Penn Hospital, which is next door. And we also have some collaboration with the major device manufacturers, so they provided us some sample device algorithm descriptions. And we also worked with two model-based design tool vendors like MathWorks and National Instrument, so that we get the state-of-the-art understanding of model-based design. And we are in the larger group, which is called CyberCardia, which is the NSF CPS Frontier project. Yeah, that's the end of my presentation. If you have any questions, happy to answer them.
So this is by far the speaker who gives us a lot of time to discuss.
So I'll ask my question a different way. So your process of backtracking from an abstract model to a specific model, how does that process change when you have fewer or greater number of sensors? So what is it that changes?
I think the abstraction step need to be different, because now we have three. The abstraction step will definitely be changed, because we now, for example, have 3 sensors, and the rules will change as well. And the initial models that we have also has to be changed, because the initial model now is capable of measuring the two locations. So the whole thing will change. Does that answer your question? But if we have a new set of heart models and we did the abstraction, I would imagine we would get less branches, because the ambiguity has been resolved a little bit by adding a new sensor, right? Sure. So we may only find 1 or 2 examples instead of 3 or 4.
Okay.
So, sure.
Can you speak to the deeper theory and how you're actually providing over-approximations of the reachable sets?
Okay, so the over-approximation, we maintain a timed simulation relationship between the more refined model to the more abstract model. Intuitively, what it means is that in the more refined model, if there exists a transition, there should exist a transition in the more abstract model as well. And if it's a timed automata, so if it decides to stay in a particular state, in the more abstract model, it should allow that as well. so that the more abstract model covers all the behavior of the more refined model. But feel free to add more behaviors in there. It's still abstract. So.
Sorry, I probably missed it. Can you say again, how did you derive the model exactly? Was it actually data-driven? And how is it compared to existing models?
Okay. So that I'll treat that as two questions.
Okay.
So the data-driven part, currently the model is not completely data-driven because, in a sense, because like we are not observing the patient data and construct the model. Instead, our model was constructed according to electrophysiology. So we can find the parameter, and the model parameter we use is exactly the same that they use in the clinical aspects. So we can directly get the number for the parameters from clinical literatures.
Mm-hmm.
So, but when I speak about data-driven model, I was trying to say like the actual patient data. How do you use actual patient data to identify the parameters in the model? So in that sense, it's not pure data-driven, but it's still valid model in that sense. What was the second question? Can you repeat?
How is it related to existing models?
So existing models try to understand the behavior of the heart by, it's a pure white box model, so that it captures every detail, every tissue of the heart. But my model is mostly a behavior model. It's a behavior model modeling the observable behavior of a device. So it's different aspects.
So, but the verification, your verification is more like ask a clinician to sort of try it out in some sense, right? Can you actually use this white box model to actually, because it seems to be more detailed than what you are using, right?
It will definitely have more detail, but it will have more parameters, right? The more parameters, you cannot claim this heart model belongs to, it's correlated to some patient. So it's still not valid in some sense. So yeah.
If we go back to that question I asked, kind of feeding into another part. Then, so once you have put together an outer approximation of the regional set, you put in some design specifications. You want to find a point that is in violation, right? This counterexample. So do you have to employ a binary search, go back through the library of possibilities?
I think the search is very simple. So verify the model at the root, and if there's a counterexample, verify all its children.
Right.
Until
how large is that library?
The library currently is not that large.
Well, I'm saying, the children. How many children are there?
So I think in that particular case, we have like 20 or 30 models. So it's not large, and verifying each of the model doesn't take a lot of time because the heart model is simple enough, especially the one closer to the root is much simpler.
Sure, but I imagine this is a combinatorial search problem, right?
What does that mean?
So essentially, as the number of models grows, the deeper, right, the number of children grows, you rapidly exponentiate possibilities that you have to search through.
Well, I think to answer your question for this particular example, I don't think you will get, like, the size of the tree is decided by how many leaves you have, right? I don't think we can get a lot of those.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's really the conditions.
Yeah, because these are the conditions, and even if you want to have more variability on that, it's still a finite and a very small number, so that the tree itself won't be that huge. I also want to add that the abstraction rules were applied in a certain order. It's not randomly grouping. So otherwise, we'll have a tree.
Okay, so you're explaining structure.
Yeah. So basically, the core research that what I do is how to encode the domain knowledges into modeling and refining and even abstracting the models.
So I have a weird question. So let me start by saying that when I start the presentation and say heat exchanger fouling is a major problem, I guess there are bigger problems than heat exchanger fouling. Why I'm saying that? If I go through I can actually apply many of the techniques, methodologies, and approaches that you used on heat exchanger fouling. That's a far less sexy problem or application, okay? If I go through what you do and try to apply it to heat exchanger fouling, avoiding a very old problem, what is it in the methodologies that is unique so that can be applied and still produce papers, projects, proposals, and everything else? So you do some modeling, and you do some model reduction, abstraction, and you do some, what is the other key? Code verification, as well as scenarios identification. So what is it brand new? So even if you were doing it in a completely old and rusted field, it would still have value.
I would say it's the approach to actually abstract the model and also refine it into different contexts. That's something I haven't seen people doing. And so people doing verification do either two things, right? They model a very specific scenario and check that against the system and say, okay, it's safe, but it doesn't cover the whole behavior. Or some people do it the other way. They use the most abstract model. They say, okay, I covered all the conditions, and I found the property that is actually valid, so so the system is safe. But the problem is, in the real world problem, none of these will work, right? You need to have you need to be able to find the different safety evaluations. So I think that's the core of the or the novel part of the research. I don't think I've seen anybody else is doing that. So the abstraction and refinement techniques has been used for system design, right? So some of the systems are so complex, they use over-approximation to reduce the complexity. But at the same time, they claim that, okay, anything other than the original model is a spurious counterexample, meaning that it's not valid. But we actually use over-approximation as our advantage to capture more behaviors. So that's also something I think is novel.